Hello! We're early. We're an hour early. So sorry for those of you that had to get up really early for this. The guys of you that are in California and whatever else. I'm not really sorry because I have to live in a little sweatbox when I'm presenting on this, and you're in California, so you can get up early and go to Starbucks and come back and watch. Yay! But for those of you that aren't endeavouring to get their caffeine fix, welcome. It's earlier than normal, I know. We'll talk about that in a second. But you're going to spend, if you wish to, the next hour with me talking about that program up there, or more importantly, using that program. Capture One, which is a raw editing piece of software that allows us to take the images that are stored on your memory cards in your camera, that came from the sensor, that came from the light that fell through the lens, from whatever was in front of it. We take that into software, we process it, we edit it, we hopefully improve it, and sometimes we can fix things that went wrong at the point of capture, and the whole of the next hour is going to be dedicated to editing your pictures that you sent in to make them looking sparkly and wonderful. Isn't that nice? So for those of you that are watching this in about an hour's time, yes, you're late. We are early, but there was some warnings. Where did the warnings come? Well, they came on our website. So if you go to my site, so paulreefer.com, what is it, /workshops, I think it is, and you will find under the workshops menu, you will see there's one that says live online sessions, and that is where we announce when every single session is going to be held, including masterclasses, including pro tips, things, and in there you will find any updates to any times. For those of you that want to get involved a bit more in discussion, but also get a bit of a heads up, you'll find that group. And in there we announce as well that we would be a little bit earlier today. So for those of you that have missed that, really sorry. But for those of you that are benefiting the other side of the world, like Alan, well done, Alan. You get to do this not in the middle of the night. Alan's in Australia, so hey, there are some winners, there are some losers. Who knows? What did we see earlier on comments? I think it was Roger. Does the early start mean we get an extra hour of your wisdom? Unfortunately, it doesn't. The early start means that I can be on a different PR call later on. Unfortunately, that I can't move. It's as simple as that. It's not very exciting. Well, it is, but it's not very exciting for the purposes of this. So, for those of you that do not know, Capture One, that program there, is written by the clever guys out in Copenhagen in Denmark. It is as I say, a raw processing piece of software that takes the raw data from your camera, or as raw as it can be, processes it through a series of curves and color systems and profiles, uses your lens data, your camera data, and so on to get the best possible outcome in terms of what you see on your computer when you load in the picture, and then gives you access to all of these wonderful tools to be able to edit them and change them. Myself, am a landscape and cityscape and commercial photographer. So typically we're going to focus on a lot of that stuff. So if you're here to see nude fine art stuff taken in someone's garage, wrong place. It's not really my genre. However, of course you can edit all of that stuff in Capture One. In fact, a lot of Capture One's tools are designed for portrait photographers, but each and every one of them, as we've discussed for several years now, is equally applicable to a landscape or a cityscape or a casual photographer or a lifestyle photographer, whatever you want to call it. And we'll use as many of them as we can today as we're going through. Ray is live. Well done. So as you see me putting things up on there, please, for those of you that are live, make this as interactive as you wish. You can sit there quietly and just listen to my weird voice lull you into a sense of sleep, or you can ask questions, you can heckle, you can challenge, you can question, you can disagree. This is a wonderful forum where people are allowed to disagree with each other, but most importantly we're going to try and get decent images out. So for those of you that have no idea what Capture One is, go to capture1.com. You can download a free trial. We are currently using version 16.6.6, which is the latest version. From last week, you'll remember me saying to people, wait on Tahoe. If you're on a Mac, I would still say the same. For people's awareness, today we are using Tahoe on this computer. It has presented some challenges to some of the software that I use. So, roller coaster. But most importantly for me, yes, Capture One at the moment isn't too unreliable. In fact, I'd say it's pretty reliable on it. But same as I said last week, if you do not need a feature in Tahoe, and I don't need, it's just we're trying to do a bit of a progressive migration. You don't have to move up to the latest operating system immediately. You don't have to be on the latest unless you've literally bought a computer that only has it on. I get that. But just bear in mind right now, as of this moment, this recording, Capture One have not yet officially released any support for macOS Tahoe. So if you do upgrade to it and you do install Capture One, if you have a problem, they will struggle to offer you official support. Doesn't mean they're going to tell you to go away, but they can. They don't have to. They don't have to help. Please, whenever you're downloading a version of Capture One, including this one, look at the release notes. It will tell you the operating system version that you're able to go to with support. Nothing stopping you going to a different operating system if you choose, but you aren't supported if you do. Okay. Oh, look, see, all the Aussies are coming out. Isn't that nice? Hello from Melbourne. Hello, Peter. You can watch live. Maybe do we shift it permanently? Do we have a couple of months where we hurt the guys in the West and I don't know. We'll have a look. Probably not is the answer. For those of you that are subscribing to Capture One, you have access to the latest version whenever you choose. It would be madness to pay a subscription every single month or every single year and not be on the latest version unless there was a very good reason to not be. So please make sure you're using your subscription to the max and you are always on the latest version. If you're on a perpetual license, then you are entitled to anything that the middle number, let me just pull up a Grover pointer quickly. This number, oh, he disappears. The number that his chin is settling on, there we go. The middle one. That, as long as that doesn't change, you're entitled to that version if you bought into that version. The second it does, and it goes to, let's say, 16.7, 0.8, 0.9, whatever, unless they say otherwise, you are not entitled to the later version. You would have to upgrade. Now, interestingly, and I forgot to mention this a little while ago, I went onto mycapture1.com account earlier, and because I have one, we have paid licenses and all that stuff, and at the top is a banner. And it's something that people used to have. So there are two things that Capture One have done in terms of loyalty in quotes that are actually quite good in the industry. The first is the loyalty discount thing. So people were worried about subscribing, that if you stop paying, you stop getting access to the application. And that's true of most applications. Adobe is an example of that. But Capture One do it a slightly different way, which is every year you subscribe, you gain a 20% loyalty discount effectively. So after 1 year, you get 20% off a perpetual license if you choose. After 2 years, you get 40% off. After 3 years, 60% off. You get the gist. But the most important thing is, after 5 years, that means you can, to use the word, off-ramp. Then you can come away with a perpetual license of the latest version you were using, in quotes, for free. So if you did ever want to get out of the subscription ecosystem, you can. Doesn't mean you're entitled to future upgrades. You stop paying for that, but it does mean you get free access. Conversely, if you look in your account, if you have currently a perpetual license, you may see an offer at the top of your account that says, here is a percentage off a subscription for the first year, just to be clear, only 1 year. So you get a percentage off the subscription, and you can, yes, keep your perpetual license that you currently have. A lot of people used to be very worried that if you switched to subscription, you would lose your perpetual license. That used to be the case. Now, no, you can keep both. Now, your perpetual license will obviously get older and older and older because it's not going to be updated. But for those that wanted the best of both worlds, actually, they are providing it, kind of. So, yeah, there we go. Right. Tim, good point. I'll put that up on the screen when we're in Capture One. We'll cover that too. So news, let's call it that. Number one, if you want to send files in, this is how to do it. So paulrefillive.wetransfer.com. Upload your EIP or your RAW file with any adjustments you've made, if you've made any. Please include your name. If you do not include your name in the notes, we will not include your picture. Put any notes in there of things that you've done, things that you're struggling with, things that you want help with, things that don't make sense, things that have gone wrong, things that you think are better than what we would do. Great, let's see it. All of that stuff in the notes, and upload it. We will try and get them on to the next cycle, the next series of images. Okay, so That's our uploads. Secondly, I've already covered it, but Facebook group is where basically discussions happen. All of that group stuff is discussions, conversations, uploads. You will also find in there monthly competition. And there are only 7 days left to enter this month's competition. You win absolutely nothing of real value. Virtual value, maybe, bragging rights mainly. But go into that Facebook group, you will find the competition post, upload your best work. I'm not even going to tell you the subject. You've got to go into that group to be able to join in. But if you do, we will feature you when we announce the competition winner. Isn't that fun? Right. Facebook group, done. What shall we move on to next? Masterclasses. Fun stuff. So we already have these masterclasses. Most of you, or many of you, have been on them. They teach you to do wonderful things in different genres, different topics. And all of that stuff is available in the link that's down below. But we've got a new one. That's exciting, isn't it? That's really exciting. New one being architecture and perspective. So a lot of you have asked for this over the last probably 6 months or so. And this spans a lot of different things. It is this Sunday. For those of you that can't make this Sunday, you can still access it on Rewind or Replay. You're able to access it forever after that point. The link for that or access to it is in the description down below. We will be covering everything from external architecture, perspective distortion when we look down or up at buildings and so on, internal architecture, how we manage the distortion of things as they get nearer to a wide angle lens, how we manage barrel distortion, how we manage pincushion, all of those things that make lots of people confused, and also most importantly how we make an architectural or a geometric image look polished, finished, correct, because there is correct in this world, and ready for print or ready for commercial use. So that's sort of the gist of it, I'd say. It's 90 minutes long this Sunday, so say 3 p.m. UK time, which is, what's that, 7 a.m. in California. Sorry, guys. Sorry, Alan, it's back to late at night in Australia. But for those of you that do shoot anything around cities, towns, buildings, interiors, exteriors, real estate, stuff like that, we'll cover what we can in that time and give you the tools that you need to make them look very, very good. Right. Is that all the news we've got? Kind of, but not quite. So some of you have been asking for some time, and you'll maybe be able to link these up. Put this on Instagram the other day, asking for what people thought. Coming soon. I'm not going to say any more than that picture, but there we go. We'll call it "And Another Thing." Interestingly, when I asked some of you on Instagram yesterday what you thought that might suggest, I'll give you some of the answers. Hint on upcoming features. Possibly, but we always do that anyway. Like intersecting masks, which may or may not be a feature coming. A Golden Grover trophy packed in a secret box. Another one. OnlyFans announcement. And that I've cloned myself, which worries me, because while this picture does have two approaching middle-aged blokes, I'm not middle-aged, am I? No, I'm not. I'm below middle-aged. He might be, Grover. But yes, Reefer and Grover may be joining forces again. We'll see how that pans out, but there'll be more news coming over the following weeks. But yes, there's something to be very excited about. Sadly, I hate to break it to you, but Capture One don't actually own a private jet, and sadly, Google got a little bit carried away with itself. But yeah, there will be something quite cool that we will share with you coming up. So watch this space. Isn't that fun? Right, let's get going. Let's get editing into Capture One. So Capture One as an interface, completely customizable, as you guys mostly know. If your toolbar up here is missing anything, I love to have guides up there, but you're just going to right click here, customize toolbar, and you have access to all the tools that you can drag around and add onto your toolbar up here, which is lovely. We can also change the position of browsers. We can change tools that are up here. If ever you want to customize your workspace, you can right click up here, add tool, and you can choose from the myriad of tools available as different panes. You can move them into the fixed area up here or the scrolling area up here. I would always suggest to every single person editing in Capture One that you have your histogram and your layers above this line. That line being the pinned line. So that pinned line means that anything above there, as I start scrolling through these other tools, this doesn't move. It is so important because it means that when I'm going from tab to tab, I keep an eye on what layer I'm actually editing, and this is my output histogram. So you can see when we move into different tabs, it doesn't necessarily include all of those things automatically, or they're sometimes squished small. What's in? Have you? I've just noticed something which you guys may not have done, which is you notice all my icons are wobbling. And I think it's because I went into preferences and did a customized toolbar. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. If you want a reason potentially to not upgrade to the latest operating system immediately, that might be one of them, because these are all moving around quite significantly, right? That's not good, is it? Right, what I'm going to do, we're going to talk about Steve's story for a second while I just restart Capture One. Right, serious lesson. Bear in mind, we've been playing with Capture One in Tahoe just to check stuff through, and I haven't seen any problem until that, when I was seeing all of that stuff going on. Steve's story, sad story. It is a sad story. Went to Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and car was smashed and my entire gear stolen. That's actually really bad. And I know lots of people where it's happened. Steve, sorry, it's awful. But yes, backup and storage. Keep hold of everything you've got in duplicate minimum, if not triplicate. Cloud storage is great, but also have physical backups. Who knows, the cloud company can go bankrupt and all this sort of stuff. We hear horror stories of it. So please do keep backed up, keep insured for obvious reasons. But yeah, sorry to hear that, Steve. It sucks, and I'm seeing more and more of it, which is scary. Right, back to not seasick, as Tim has just said. Right, so bear that in mind. In Tahoe, as it stands right now, if you go into your preferences for your customized toolbar and come out of it, you will end up with seasick icons. So just restart Capture One. There you go, Keith. That means you've just admitted that you went up to Tahoe without permission. Anyway, yes, a restart has cleared it up. It's cleared it up there. So please, on your tabs, make sure that you have your histogram and your layers always visible. It means that you keep control of what you're editing and the output that you have. So this being your output histogram from 0 down here, in other words, black. If you were to print it, it would be solid black. Up to here, 255, if you were to print it, there would be no ink laid down. It would be just the pure paper. So, in other words, no values of any color whatsoever, and everything in between. And if we wanted to apply the sort of Ansel Adams scenario of photography practice, we want to make sure in a zone system you've got stuff from the very darkest parts to the very lightest parts. And we love stuff that's in between. The problem is that when we see an image where there's a big bulb in the middle, it tends to suggest that it's a low contrast image. And if we want power and impact, we love contrast. If we want subtlety and mood, and typically we want a relatively soft contrast, low contrast, muted image, and that means that the data, you can tell this visually, the data on the histogram is less stretched out, it's squished together. It doesn't have to be in the middle, it could be at the left, could be at the right, but it's all in one clump, one cluster, and that gives us a visual clue that says this will print or display flat. The difference in values from the darkest to the lightest pixels are roughly the same or compressed, therefore it's not going to give you huge contrast. Alternatively, if you go to another picture like this one, huge darks here, there are some lights in here, but we can, you can tell the story of a picture from its histogram. This is also another one from Bob, but we can see in here there's some highlight bumps here, low lights in here, but we can, again, you can see how that's going to print. You can predict how it's going to print. Prasad, let's just cover that quickly. Would it be possible to discuss when, why, how to apply shadows and highlights regions, contrast, if any methods other than HDR tools pull the opposite direction, curves and lumen and so on? we can do that today. Just bear in mind there's a pro tip session on contrast and clarity and HDR, I think, that probably covers a lot of that too. Yes, so effectively, yes, we can. But let's just see if we can do it today a little bit. Right, this was the shot that it was Bob, wasn't it? Yes, Bob sent in. That's why we have your names. So this was last week, and we said that we would pick up on it. So this was a shot of the sewage ponds. No, it's not. It's Sacramento Delta. That was it. But there's also a shot of some sewage ponds. Sacramento Delta, and it was sort of quite wispy, quite, serene. And the edit had made it less serene, let's call it that. So if I go to before and after, here's my before, here's my after. Now think about what I just said about the histogram. If I create a new variant, what that means is we're not changing anything in the current edit. We're not creating a new version of the raw. We're just creating another version of the edit, which has no edits made to it already. If I clone it, right click and clone variant, it takes that version and it duplicates it, leaves one raw. We're never ever duplicating the physical raw, but it does mean that we start from the same place that one was edited. This, the new variant, means we start from no edits. And you can see here, so we've got all these layers in this edit, these changes. In this version, nothing. We're back to as it was out of the camera. So out of the camera, it's not unusual. You have a slight lean on it. It's not completely straight and so on. That's why we're editing. But look at this histogram. It is very, very much crushed in the middle. So not huge contrast, what we just talked about. Our brightest areas are not particularly bright. If I move my mouse over here, we should get some values at the top, which we are not. Oh, is that a Tahoe thing? Oh, isn't this fun? We're doing live Tahoe checking. Now we get some values. Okay, something weird going on. But so as I move my mouse around, this is giving me here the values of red, green, and blue, and also their overall luminosity, that being 131 at the moment. So out of 0 to 255, that's the overall luminosity. I can tell you from this histogram, there's nothing in there that is brighter than about halfway, maybe a little higher. So when we're seeing 138, 145, okay, getting up there. This stuff, 140, 145, yeah, 140, 130, 120. If we were to look really closely, maybe this area here, yep, so 169. And we can see this little orange bar moving around our histogram up here. So the histogram is telling a tale that says this is low contrast. Low contrast typically means calm, serene, muted, soft. Now let's go to the edit. And we see that while the histogram is bunched in the middle, generally, this contrast curve has gone quite wide, right? So the highlights have been stretched certainly up to here. So my brightest areas are way up here in this orange bar. 235, up here 183. This is actually sky up here, by the way. I thought it was looked like a tape mark. It's not, it's sky. There's hills in the background here. It's overexposed sky, just to be clear, but it's sky. And our shadows down here are nice and deep, so they're not completely under in the shadowed area, but they're at 32, let's say, in luminosity, compared to here where we were at sort of 39, 40 and so on. So the darks have got darker, the lights have got lighter, and everything's been stretched in between, and that gives us a higher contrast image. But that's the problem, which is if it's high contrast, that loses some of the serenity, let's call it that, and some of the softness in the overall shot. So since then, Bob has sent me this edit, which apparently is more aligned to what he remembers, I believe. Softer and less contrasting. Now, if I look at, and you can see in here, this contrast curve here, or the histogram, big, deep shadows, tailing off, less in the midtones, big upper midtones into the highlights and down again. So two peaks, two curves. Think Madonna histogram. No, maybe I am middle-aged. I was going to say then instead think, oh yeah, anyway, let's not go there. You're looking at a histogram that has got stark contrast. In other words, there's the stretch between the shadows and the highlights has not a lot in between, meaning that you're getting almost a binary contrast. bright highlights, dark shadows, and less of the stuff in between. This edit here, Bob's latest edit, you can see here, that's the Twin Peaks element of it has softened. And that means that the mid-tones have been filled in, so it's less contrasty, which I would argue then is more muted, softer, all of that stuff that goes with it. So this is an edit that is less contrasted, for sure. Certainly less than this. Is it completely muted? I'm not entirely sure. It is color shifted. So if I go to before and after, I can see here, this is our out of camera. This has got a lot more pink, a lot more bluey pink. This here, the original edit, I would say is probably closer in color terms to the original, or to the raw. But this does have a certain look to it, which is a little softer. So in the interests of complete fairness, I'm going to start from scratch. For no other reason than I think this is actually a simpler edit than we need to worry about, frankly. First off, I'm going to straighten it. So you just saw I use this tool up here, the little rotate tool or the straighten tool. Click on the arrow. You can choose to rotate freehand. You can rotate it in 90-degree increments by clicking, or you can use the straighten tool. The straighten tool, you can click and drag along a line that you think should be straight. That's the key thing. And Capture One will match to it. You could also use the auto keystone tool, but this image is not keystone, it's straightening. Personally, while I understand that is sky, I'm a big fan of effectively a mindset that says, I'm not there to explain a print. And funnily enough, yesterday I was talking to someone at the British Institute about judging. So we're judging at the moment annual competitions. And we were talking about descriptions and titles of images. And I struggle a little bit when I see photographers put in a technical aspect into their title. If the title is to describe a feeling or to describe a view or a scene or a story, I get that. But when you see photographers having to explain in their titles a technical issue, it feels like that's not a title. That's like someone over your shoulder telling you why you shouldn't worry about X, Y, or Z. And I'm in this place with this. If someone wasn't there to tell me that that's sky, and I don't want to spend a huge amount of time looking at it, I just think that looks odd in that corner. So even though it was there, I hate doing this, but we are. Q for the healing brush tool, or click on the little plaster or band-aid. I'm going to choose my source location by using the Alt button or Option button. Clicking. And I'm just going to paint in that area and let Capture One smooth it in. So to me, it's created a heal layer for me automatically. So it's in my layers tool. But for me, that just feels easier to deal with on a print. I don't have to explain what that is effectively. Right. So we have two directions we can go with this. We can increase our contrast or we can keep it calm. So let's first off go to the increase contrast option and to Prasad's question around shadows and highlights versus curves and so on. Let's just very quickly look at it. Sorry, hello, that's not sky, it's hillside. Is it? I don't agree. This is a line of the hillside, right? If it is, then we've got a weird thing going on. Let's just create a new variant of this quickly. This is out of camera, I believe, unless we've got a crop already going on in there. We don't. Okay. So let me just pull up our exposure and our contrast. I'm sort of preempting a lot of stuff here. I don't see this as hillside. This is hillside for sure. This is the ridge line of a hill. But for that to be that overblown, either the hill behind it is illuminated or that's sky. Maybe it's bouncing back some sunlight, but either way, that part behind it is unexplainable to me in my head when I'm looking at the picture overall, and that's the only reason I'm changing it. So the problem with this, and just to be very clear, ethically, we're altering a landscape here, and I'm not a big fan of doing that. But if I've got to explain what's going on in the picture and explain that top right, and just look at this edit here, this looks like it's been taped, or it looks like a scratch on a photo sort of thing, I would just get it out. Now, to Edwin's point, would you not crop bottom and top? Yeah, we'll come on to that in a second, because I think there's a slightly different approach with this image. So let's go into here. This is my version, which has got a slightly lighter bit in the top right. If you ever see that with the healing brush, don't use the healing brush. Use the cloning brush, set it to about 50%, and just clone on top of the heal. And you'll find that it's a bit more forgiving. It's not quite so obvious because you're only doing it 50%. And you don't get that blending the heal brush tries to do, especially in the corners or edges. So if you ever see that, use a mix of clone and heal. Right, our contrast. So to Prasad's point, there are different ways of managing contrast. So number one, everything that's to the left of this quarter here is a shadow. Broadly speaking, it's not a strict science, but it's a shadow. Everything to the right of this quarter here is a highlight. It tapers off as we get to the midtones. Everything that's in the bottom, let's say 5%, is a black. Everything that's in the top 5% is a white. It doesn't actually mean literally black and white. It means the darkest of all of the pixels and the lightest of all of the pixels. So it could be a red pixel that's only, I don't know, 3 or 11. A highlight could be a blue pixel that is 232 in brightness, effectively. So it's not quite literally white and black, but it's the easiest way that they have of describing it. So if I wanted to push this, the contrast tool is one way to go. Now the contrast tool is going to look smack bang in the middle at 50% and pretty much stretch anything that was to the right of it to be brighter, anything that's to the left of it to be darker. And you see that stretch coming out. Okay. If I use my HDR sliders, I could actually pull the shadows, the darkest parts, and I could make them darker. Now you see it pulls in the shadows, but it also, because it tapers, it also pulls in some of the midtones as well. So bear that in mind. Highlights. Well, if I want to shift them to the right, we'll just get the lightest parts to the right. Let's shift them to the right. Yeah. Now you see I'm shifting a lot, like 100 almost. Well, let's do 100. Hasn't really grabbed it. Why not? Because nothing was sat in here. What it's pulling is the tapering of that chunk, the top 25%, and then it slowly tapers off. If anything was in that taper, it's pulling it a little bit, but it's not really getting there. So instead, if we want to really smash contrast into something, where you need to be is twofold. Number one, we want to use these tools, that is, we want to move this histogram into the middle before we start playing with the contrast tool, if we want to do it this way. So I'm going to shift this to the right. What has that given me? Well, it's given me some highlights that are to the right of 50% and some shadows that are to the left of 50%, which means that when I now use the contrast tool, I get a more even spread. Makes sense, right? Nothing is overblown yet. Nothing is underexposed. It now means I've got highlights and I've got some shadows. So I could grab the highlights and lift them. I could also protect them. Your choice. But I can also drop down the shadows. I don't really have anything in black other than the sort of very tapered stuff, so be careful with the black and white slider. They're very powerful, and with great power comes great responsibility. But what I can do now is play with levels, because yes, my contrast tool will push the contrast out to the side, but levels tool will do it a bit more sympathetically when we get to this point. So I'm going to turn on my exposure warning, because I want to see if anything is going to go overexposed like that by pushing it too much. So this is safe, and this is safe. So what I've done now is I've stretched my histogram. So going back to the sort of Twin Peaks approach, I've got some bright highlights, I've got some dark shadows, not a lot in the middle, big contrast in that. If I have to work the midtones out and make them more contrasty, well, we have a tool for that, which is our clarity tool. Leave it on natural. Use a clarity adjustment, and you'll see that the midtones become effectively more stretched, so they become more binary. I could also use a bit of dehaze, which will get rid of a lot of the mist and so on around that. That's made it very dark, and we're even getting some warnings in here. So as a result of that, what I might choose to do then is lift up our shadows and maybe even reduce this levels adjustment there. Okay. And then not too sure about the tone on this, so I'm just going to click with my little white balance dropper there That's probably a bit more natural. Maybe we go to there. No, a bit too green. Maybe there. Right, great. I now have a lovely high contrast image that I hate. This is our before. This is our after. We have fixed, in quotes, the histogram, right? So beforehand, the histogram was sat in the bundle in the middle. We never want that because we want our big zone system. We want dark shadows. We want bright highlights. Ta-da! It's horrible, right? Because the problem with, and again, you'll hear me say this quite a lot on these sessions and also when we're talking in things like Facebook groups, the problem that we have with people that are looking for the answer, and a lot of people rely on this from photography's tips. What's the answer to a perfect histogram? There's no such thing. Because that perfect histogram, if you were actually to get your perfect histogram, it depends on who you're asking what perfection looks like. Because to me, this now has values that range from 0 up to 255, almost. Not quite clipped. But it doesn't make it better. So I would be in a place where let's reset all of these. And let's use the contrast that was actually there, which was very, very soft, subtle, muted. I might want to lift it a little bit because it is a little bit dark. Right? So to do that, I can do that purely with exposure. I might want to warm it up a little bit. And I might want to shift our tint just a touch, maybe to there. Okay. Now our midtones, I do want to be able to see a bit more detail in here. Two tools, we've already covered them, but two tools that we can play with that. One of them is clarity. It kind of does a nice job. The other is dehaze. Now we're getting into the place where it's overly contrasty because dehaze is quite a big hammer, effectively, to crack a small nut. So a little bit of dehaze. And this is where we use things in conjunction. A little bit of clarity. Okay. Maybe up to there. That's enough. Now you notice that I'm doing this on the image layer. If I wanted to think about in the future, I might want to come back and undo some of that. Right click, move image layer adjustments to the new layer. That gives me all of the adjustments I've just made, but on a layer that I can control the opacity, so how much of an impact it's having. Now to, who was it? Edwin, who asked about the crop. Yes, I personally would crop this differently. I would be in a place of, let's maybe go 16:9. Wonderful cinematic look. Maybe we go up to there. I'm not too fussed about this. Although if this reflection was here, maybe usable. But this is just too messy for my liking up here. I get it, but I don't think it's adding anything. I would be in a place where we get to maybe there. I'm not sure about this stuff on the edge. Okay. So that sort of works for me. We could do a little bit of color grading, so we can play with our colors. So we can say in our color balance, maybe we want our highlights to be a little warmer or a little cooler. Maybe I want them to feel a little frosty. Maybe I want our shadows to be a little bit warmer. Yeah, maybe our midtones to be a little bit more interesting. So maybe they go into a sort of greeny sort of view. Let's have a little look at that. So without and with, I think it's a bit too much. So I'm going to come back and back on our shadow and back on our midtone a bit. Yeah, not against that. Sort of works. Okay. Remember as well, if you have styles, whether they're ones that you've bought, whether they're ones that you've made, you can also play with them over the top. So in here, I have our styles, so that elevation pack. And I might want to look at something like seagrass that makes it look very cold, very, very crisp. Morning coffee will actually, ironically, blur it a little bit, which I'm not against in this case. And then we've got golden hour, which is going to lift it and give it some warmth and so on. I'm going to add in a little bit of that one and a little bit of that one. So we're doubling down. We've got 4 layers that have been added because of those 2 styles. Other styles are available. You don't have to buy ours. It's good. And more importantly, you can make your own. I'm just going to back away all of these to almost half of what they were before. But if I then remove them, Sorry, not that one. Ah, silly me. Leave it there. Right, if I remove these, we go to there, quite muted. Here we go to a styled position. It's probably a little bit too styled if I'm being fair. Let's just pull that back to about 23, to about 20, and then the warm tones back a little bit as well. I would then be in a place of, because of the feeling of this, it needs to feel soft and nostalgic and all that sort of stuff. Pull down a bit of vignetting. You see my contrast is here, right in the middle. It's a lovely, just muted, calm, soft contrast. We don't have to make everything brash and hard. So I'd be in a place of going back to my image or my moved image layer, warming the whole thing a touch, maybe playing with tint a little bit. Okay. Now, morning coffee one actually adds in a little bit of negative clarity. I'm going to combat that, funnily enough, by pumping up a bit more clarity there. And if I do want to add in overall some contrast in terms of the brights or the darks, I'm just going to use that with the levels. So I'm just going to go maybe 5 there, maybe 2, 4, 5 there, and I get there. Now, is this an iconic print or whatever? I'm not convinced. I don't see that in this print. But as a record of what was there at the time, I think this is pretty nice. Now, the only thing that is a little bit frustrating is this is a little bit unclear in these trees here. But we can fix that really easily. New layer. Tree structure. You can guess where we're going. Radial. Big radial mask. Just draw it and stretch it. Make it really soft. And drag it into the trees in the middle. I'm going to make it really wide as well. So we get all of those trees. Lovely. Go to my structure tool down here and pull that up. And it's just going to give us a little bit more crispiness in the trees themselves. It's not going to affect down here or any of that stuff. We don't want this to be prime position. So regardless of what you think about the view, the picture, or whatever else, I'm just offering 2 different approaches. And I think you'll understand what I mean by sometimes the fix in contrast terms. If I go here, which is Bob's, again, nothing wrong with this edit. It works. If that's what you remember, then great. It's just it feels like this bottom one is a bit more designed, a bit more intentional as an edit. That's sort of where I get to. To Ash's point, love to see a black and white version, possibly high key or low key. Okay. Let's clone that. Enable black and white. Now, in order for black and white is an interesting one. We do rely more on contrast. All of that stuff that I just did around toning was gone in black and white. We're just left with a mid-tone contrast. So I almost get to the point, unfortunately, where we might need to start playing with these sliders just to get us some detail in there. Let's pull those in. Those are the branches. A little bit of magenta. Where's green going for us? Nothing. So I'd end up in a place of maybe we need to actually even put in a contrast curve. So I'm going to anchor the midtones of the image. Just to be clear, the midtone is here. This is about 128. But look at my data. It sits between here and here. So I'm going to click here to anchor that midtone. That makes sense? Because now, when I lift anything brighter than the midtone and drop anything darker than the midtone, it's of the midtone of the data that's in that image, not 128. Because 128 isn't necessarily the middle of our data. It's the middle of that image. So that would be a black and white version. Personally, I think this looks a bit more serene. But certainly I get to a place where, in my head, this is the original one from Bob. This feels very factual, very clean, apart from this stuff. This, to me, feels more, as I say, designed. That's just sort of where I get to in these ones. So print-wise, black and white version, I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. I don't hate it at all. This one I think is probably softer. This one I think is a lot for the eye to take in, and it just feels like cropping, muting, reducing contrast is the right thing to do for this sort of image. Tony, as a general rule, is it wiser to use levels after using the HDR tools? I would always check levels after doing anything with contrast. The reason is that they keep changing. So let's say in here, so my levels are fine here. Let's say I decided to up my exposure. Great. Let's say you'll know this from previous. Always have your exposure warning on. Make sure your exposure warning is set to 255 and 0, so it's telling you absolute overexposure or underexposure. But let's say I've done this and I think actually that's quite nice. What I've forgotten is I may have already made a levels adjustment. So let's say I go and pull up let's say I've done a levels adjustment here, right? So nothing wrong with the exposure warning here. Great. No, well, a little bit of red there, but let's go to there. Okay. Now I go into my highlights. Let's turn off my exposure warning. Imagine I didn't see that. In fact, let's not do highlights. Contrast, a relatively mundane thing, right? Easy thing. But what I've just done is I've just clipped the edge of my levels there. Maybe I've lifted my highlights and I'm just clipping each time those levels. Maybe I lift the white and you see these levels starting to bunch up. If I were to turn on my exposure warning, you'd now see those things. So I would always go back to levels, just constantly back to levels, back to your exposure warning, and just keep an eye on, am I doing anything that's pushing something off the end of 255 or off the end of 0? But yeah, that's where I'd get to, Bob. It feels very different, I know, from the edit that you have. Let me just undo what I just did there. But yes, it feels very different. It doesn't have the texture in the background, but I would argue the texture in the background is actually quite noisy. So leaving it as low contrast just feels like we're getting away with that noise to a certain extent, which may be a bit more forgiving. There we go. Right, let's have a look at, let's go with Bart's. Speaking of exposure warning, okay. Bart sent a note talking about the fact, oh, sorry, let's get rid of Tony's comment. Sorry about that. Yeah, actually, so given that Tony's thing was over the top of that, that's where we end up with this instead of maybe this. Doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. It's just, to me, this feels like a print that would be quite calming on a wall. This feels like a lot for my eyes to take in, especially with all of this stuff in the foreground. I don't think it helps. If the mirror had been up there, maybe, but without it, I don't think this actually helps. So this shot here from Bart, what Bart mentioned was that the shot came out a lot more yellow than they remember. If I go to, sorry, my before and after, this is before, this is after, so it's already been muted a little bit. And I sort of get to a point of, right, this is almost a recovery one rather than a artistic one. So we're trying to get it back to what we saw in some way. So a few things that we can do. Number one, we're going to create a clone of the variant so I can see where we're at. Now there are two masks on here. One is an adjustment layer for the foreground, which Bart has dropped the exposure, dropped some saturation. I believe if I go into our color editor somewhere, maybe not. Okay, maybe it was done with white balance. Yes. So using white balance to basically pull what was yellow to be more blue, more cool. So we're going from 5415, which is quite a warm image or daylight, down to 4891. So it's been cooled. We probably wouldn't do it that way. We'll have a look at that in a second. And an AI mask, the AI mask being on the building out there, and I believe that was to make sure that it came out nice and red. So if we go to, where would that have been done? In here, in our advanced color editor, in here. So, oh, interesting. Okay, so it's pulled down saturation and pulled down lightness. I was expecting that to be the opposite. So if I turn that off, oh, okay. I think it needs more saturation and less lightness, but we'll come on to that. Okay, so let's start with overall. In fact, I'm going to start with a new variant completely. Wow, there was quite a crop on there. So we've got some shadow in here. I get that. Let's. Are we going to start with a new variant, or do we? Oh yeah, because we've already got some So there's some color editor stuff going on already in the overall image layer. Basically, anything that was a yellowy color to become more green. So I'm going to start from here. First thing, I want to look at an exposure warning. Out of the camera, there was no exposure warning. From the edit, there is. So that tells me we've pushed something too far. So bear that in mind. Always go back to the raw out of the camera. Was it overblown then? And the answer was no. So in here, let's pull down our exposure and see what was in the sky. There is texture in the sky. We can see there's some cloud line there and some cloud line there. In fact, we could really pull it down and see. Yeah. So there is texture in the sky. We've just got to get it back. It is a bit yellow, I give you that, and I understand the crop. So let's go onto our straighten tool, and I'm going to use this line of green along there to straighten that. And then we're going to use a crop tool, maybe a 1x2, to go there. It would be nicer if that sat a little lower, but we are where we are. Okay, how close are we to the original crop there? Not far off. Okay. So overall, yes, we do have a problem with the yellow. Yes, we have a problem with the sky. So the yellow problem. Well, overall, if I were to pull down my white balance, now here's a fun one. Why is that happening? Why is that happening to the sky? It's really simple. The bit that's blowing is the blue channel, right? By cooling down the overall image, we're adding effectively blue. The blue in the sky was already at 253, 254. Adding more blue makes the bits that were right on the cusp. You can see up here, this blue here, that's now been pushed to be overexposed. So we've got to bear that in mind, okay? Which means that we might do something different with the sky. But for now, let's ignore that and just focus on here. So cooling down the overall picture gets us into a more green place. Removing some tint gets us to a more green space. Okay. New layer. AI brush. Sky. Should turn on my exposure warning, or turn it off, sorry. So I've now got the sky, but it's going to miss all of these areas in here, right? That's annoying. It's really annoying. We could refine the mask, but we don't need to, because we've got that wonderful tool that we keep forgetting we have, which is Magic Brush, the little one with the stars. Right click, sample entire photo. In other words, don't get stuck like the AI brush does around trees. You can just click anywhere in here, and it's now going to add all the bits that are almost tree, the gaps basically, but in the sky. If I want to increase the tolerance, so we can go up to there to make it more forgiving, great. There we go. So now I have a, broadly speaking, decent sky mask. It's not perfect though, right? So the way that we make it perfect is with refine mask. So with refine mask, we can go maybe up to 220 or something like that. Now I've got a mask that literally includes the sky and not the trees. Now with that, I'm just going to make sure that my lens distortion or lens correction is done, and I've got diffraction correction on and chromatic aberration on, because around these high contrast lines, we might find that when I do this, you're going to find some weird colors and issues, but let's see. So with the sky, I'm going to pull down my exposure. Not a lot. We're not going to there. Don't do that. Bad. But maybe you could even push it to almost one stop of exposure. I'm going to go to maybe 70% of a stop. So 2/3 of a stop, pretty much. But I now have a blue sky, right? I didn't before. Before, we had a white overblown sky and a green foreground. These houses in here are the tiles. Okay. So, new layer. Buildings. Let's go into an AI brush, and I am going to use the AI brush here, and we're just going to choose, I could draw squares over it, but it tends to like being told what to do in pieces. Now you see here, Option and M, remember, for grayscale mask, or click up here, display grayscale mask, and you can see it then without the distractions. But you'll see we've got some challenges here around what is included and what is not within those buildings, like that bit in there, that bit in there, the chimney bit, the building bit, the wall bit, the bricks and so on. So even with an AI mask, which we all love because AI does everything, right? I'm still going to have some manual override, and that's going to be the refine mask. So refine mask, going to go to there to soften it. And I've now got a better mask around those objects. Refine is essential nowadays. With that mask, we're going to go to our color editor. There we are. Got confused. First off, what color do we think these are, right? So let's just go into here. Well, that one says orange. This one says it's orange, 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 orange. So where we say red, and this is a psychological thing, right? We think that they're red because they're red buildings. When we click, it's not red. It's orange. So just don't fall into that trap. And the advanced tool will give you that. So if I were to click in here, yeah, it is. It's very much orange. So let's go include the reds, include the yellows. Now remember, this isn't including every yellow and every red. It's including everything inside of this pyramid that is masked in this layer. So it is only including those colors from this mask. So it's almost like a double protection, right? It can't do anything outside of the mask, and it can only do things to these colors. With those colors, we can increase the saturation, decrease their lightness, and shift their hue to be a bit more red. Now I'm going extreme so we can see the difference. Let's now back that away. So I'm going to go, having done that, -5. Maybe we increase the saturation by 10. Maybe we decrease the lightness by about 20, maybe about 30. We're going to split the difference. We're going to go -25. Okay, I now have some red buildings, some more green forest, and a blue sky rather than an overblown sky. If I want these greens to stand out more, let's go back to our main image layer, so the primary image layer. In my color editor, I'm just going to actually use the basic one and just click in here. What do we get out of clicking in here? It's yellow, right? Because it's the yellows that are making it look more yellow than green. So let's use the yellow in the color editor. Basic one, it's fine. Shift its hue to be more green instantly. Reduce the lightness. Don't need to do much of the saturation, actually. If you did that, it's going to become a bit too putrid. New layer. Gradient tool. Why? Because I want to soften the viewer to look up towards where those buildings were, because that was my primary subject. Let's pull down our exposure in the foreground. And then again, this is personal choice, but I would on this one do a little bit of a soft vignette to get it into there. Now I've got some headroom. So back to Tony's point. I think it was Tony. Was it Tony? Maybe I got that wrong. What was Tony's point? After all of those changes, turn on my exposure warning. Go to my levels, because I've got this headroom. And I want to use the headroom, in this case, for a higher contrast, but I don't want to blow things. I don't want things to go to be silly. What did I just do? Why do we keep our levels up? We keep them up so we make sure we do it on the right layer. Image layer. Let's, so here we go. We start getting some exposure warning. So we keep our exposure warning on. I don't want to sacrifice exposure for headroom, but look at my histogram now. Dark shadows, light highlights. If anything, I could actually lift up my shadows now. I would argue that feels a bit too saturated, to be honest, so I'd almost pull down our overall saturation. Maybe add a little bit of contrast in there. But I get to there instead of there. So number one, I don't have anything that's overexposed. Number two, this has got a lot more color in it, and it feels a bit more muted down here than here. If we want more contrast and more concentrated sort of, I guess, vividness of the shot, all I'd be doing on it is actually clarity. And we get to there. Again, check your exposure warning that clarity hasn't pushed something over the edge. But we go from there at the top to here. This feels more green that you wanted, less yellow. The red buildings are there. You can tweak them to your heart's content. But we've also got our sky back. It doesn't feel overblown. That's all. So it's kind of this is, again, personal taste. We go from there as one edit to here as another. To me, and maybe we don't like this little bit on the crop. Let's just pull that crop in a touch just to get rid of that edge one there. I'm not so bothered by this one, but I might come in a bit there as well. Yeah, there. So I go from there to there, fine. But if the goal was to get the greens back, to get the clarity back, to get the contrast in there, and to not have things overexposed, I would say that that achieves it. And if you want to put some more golden light into the middle, well, of course we can. So we've got in there our sky layer. If I create a new layer, not sky, right click, copy mask from sky, right click, invert mask, for everything that's not the sky. And if I did want that a little bit warmer, independently of the sky, well, I can push that there. I can pull up some tint. Yeah, but that's your call. This now separated out, and we've got every bit under control. We have nothing overexposed, nothing underexposed. Contrast right, the masking's right, the colors are more aligned to what you wanted. Yeah, that's where I get to. Oh, that blew through an hour really quickly, didn't it? But to reiterate, and let's just sort of go back to basics on this stuff. I worry when we talk about correct histograms. Okay, each of these 4 versions of the same picture has a correct histogram for what it's trying to achieve. It just might not be exactly what you wanted, or it might not match a zone system or a whatever, a huge S curve or so on. So just think about, how do you want the image to feel? Because if you don't get the feeling right, having the image correct, technically, 0 to 255, perfect, doesn't make a difference, does it? Because you're not going to want to look at it. So just think about how you want it to feel. If you want it to feel soft, muted, calm, squished histogram, less contrast. If you want it to feel brash, bold, brutal, exciting, iconic, whatever, stretch histogram, get more contrast in. But there's a place for both and everything in between. There's no right answer. On Bart's image, all of this is just playing with color. But one thing to bear in mind, you can get carried away with focusing on the one thing you're trying to fix, like making things more green. So, okay, we want to let's make everything cooler. By making things cooler, you end up blowing out the sky. So just keep an eye on the basics when you're also making interesting changes. Otherwise, you end up forgetting it and you end up with a mess that you didn't plan on creating. And when you go to print that, certainly that would just be pure white paper you're going to see underneath. Okay, next week, which is going to be, well, I need to work that out actually. But we're going to start with Edwin's shot here. Between now and then, obviously, as I mentioned, we have next masterclass. That's on Sunday. So those of you that are feeling left out or feeling like I'm not loving and attentive, then I can see you in a few days' time, which will be on Sunday. The link for that is down below. For those of you that want to get excited about something, you should do, because this could be quite cool. Mr. Grover and I are currently in planning for things. But upload your files, get them into us. We will edit as many as we can next week. In between then and now, please get into there, enter your competition. Get the competition entries going, because then we can award Grow Feast next week. And that's quite fun, right? Masterclasses that aren't the one that's coming up on Sunday, the whole backlog is available. There's a link down below as well. You also have access to the pro tip stuff that I mentioned, which will cover things like clarity, contrast, and so on. Whew. And that's it. So, see you next week, guys. Look after yourselves. Take care. Bye-bye.